All right, guys. Today, we're not going to talk too much about the kids, but we're going to focus more on mom. So often we forget as mothers that our passions are important too. And we're focusing on, signing the kids up for this and that and all these activities and working with them to discover their passions. But, what about us? So it's my belief that if we don't have something for ourselves, we can't possibly be the best versions of mom to our children. Today, I'm joined by two lovely ladies. We've got small business strategist Stacy Kessler and entrepreneur / author and mother, Krawsczyn. I got it right, Claire.
Yeah, that's great.
To talk more about how moms can discover their passions and then go chase them, right? All while being a great mom. So thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Claire. I'm so excited to have both of you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to dive in.
Awesome. So, I'm excited to have you both here because, Stacy, when we were talking previously on the Insomnicat show, you mentioned that you work with a lot of moms who are kind of in this position where they need to work on their business and their passions. And, Claire, you are an example of putting that into action. So, it's really good to have you both. But, let's get started with, all right, I have a question. Stacy, let's get started with you, right? When you're working with women who have children, right, do you see any recurring themes here or anything that kind of strikes you as, okay, a lot of moms are feeling this way when it comes to roadblocks and igniting those passions?
Absolutely. I think just wanting to be so intentional about growing and developing your children. I think sometimes they forget that they're their own person as well, and they also deserve self-care and time for themselves. And just that busyness often prevents them from really going after that and seeking out the things that they want to do. And when that comes to business, a lot of times there's just a lot of guilt around giving themselves that time to develop that, to figure out what that passion is. And there's also a lot of guilt and I guess concerns too, realistically about money, especially if they're already employed. Going off and doing your own thing can feel like a super scary thing when you're not just providing for yourself, you're providing for little ones. So I totally understand that and can appreciate that. And then the third thing I would say is just that a lot of times moms have a passion for serving other moms, and yet there's this hesitancy I sense a lot for, they think they're going to be a cliche if they do that. But in fact, moms are the best people to serve other moms because they've lived it, they know it, they've gone through the things that other moms are going through. And so just getting them to kind of lean into that if that is something that they're interested in doing. So those are kind of some of the top things that I've been seeing with some of my clients.
And Claire, was that similar for you? Did you experience kind of a similar path there when you started out?
Yeah, so Stacy really covered all the big bases that I work with and I experienced myself. So, it's the guilt is something that I think I talk a lot about myself and when I'm working with other women, but what I actually love talking about with them and what I have become a lot more comfortable with over the years is talking about the money side of things. So if you're a small business owner and you're a mom, there comes this point in your life where those two things collide and you are still financially responsible for a portion of your household's income or whatever income you were doing before. In my case, I was the primary income earner in our home. And so as my husband and I grew our family, each time I needed to really figure out what am I doing here? How can I give myself the space that I needed to go through the physical and emotional space of becoming a mom, but also keep my business alive. So that way I have a business to go back to once I've given myself proper time off. And everything that Stacy said kind of rolled into that experience for me, for sure. Depending on the day, I feel like I'm either doing an amazing job as a business owner or an amazing job as a mom. I will say it's not often I feel both, but every time I talk to another mom or really another woman business owner, it just feels so good to know that pretty much these feelings are universal to the experience of trying to balance our lives. And, balance is a tricky word, but I think trying to figure out like, where do we have space for all of these things? And then also to the point of what we're talking about today, like get back to ourselves, find the things that we're passionate about and not totally lose sight of those as well. And it's tricky. It's really, really tricky.
I'm so glad you brought up money. I wasn't even thinking of that. And I don't know why, because it's really important. I mean, so money is not talked about enough because you're like, okay, go follow your passion. And like, even if you want to, you're like, okay, but how do I do that financially? Right. I mean, do you see that, Stacey? Do you work with women who are kind of like, how do I do this financially?
Yeah, it's a huge concern for moms, for everyone, especially those who are leaving employment or who, by pursuing their passion to do their own thing, would then have to maybe go seek additional childcare or childcare in the first place. So it is a big deal, and a lot of times businesses take longer to build and hit our revenue goals than we think at the beginning. That was definitely true for me. That's been true for a lot of my clients. Yes, there are those amazing unicorn success stories where people leave their job. They already have all these amazing relationships. They want to keep doing the same thing. They're experts in their field and they hit their revenue goals right away. And that's fantastic. But a lot of times we do have to have that forethought to plan that it will take time to build. And a lot of people don't necessarily want to take on that risk or maybe aren't in a position to do that. So that is definitely a difficult reality.
What do you do? I mean, how do you work with moms who feel that way?
Yeah, so we do as much planning as we can. So there's a lot of thought going into like charging what you're worth, making sure this is worth it to you, and then also thinking about like the profitability of your business. So what do you want and need to make? And let's set up your offerings. Let's set up your structures and your expenses to make sure that that can happen. And then talk just realistically about what the path to get there could look like. And sometimes when I'm working with clients, we'll go as far as doing all that strategic planning and thinking through how do we set those goals and prioritize on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis so that we can consistently make progress towards that revenue goal without getting sidetracked and kind of falling back into some of the habits that myself and a lot of other entrepreneurs experience, where it can be difficult to really keep that momentum going. So.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, Claire, in regards to financially? You said you've been talking about that a lot lately.
Yeah, I do. And I think, just really coming from the perspective. So I spend a lot of time working with women in that time period where they're expecting a new baby, right? So in that time, finances also include insurance. And so that's something that I talk with a lot of women about. Many are really fortunate in that they have a partner who maybe has a more typical 9-to-5 job and they've got healthcare coverage that way. But there are lots of women who don't have that opportunity. And so we're making that payment, we're making that decision. So when you add a new baby, obviously your family's insurance changes a bit. And so I always fold that into the to the financial discussion as well. But just like Stacey said, I think the foresight, the planning, really knowing what you're offering and then charging the right amount for it. If you're a business owner, like that's critical to being able to give yourself even just the mental space to feel like you can step away from your business. Because so often we get like, we are our business. And so the disconnect between the two feels difficult, but with good planning and have some of those decisions in advance, we saved a lot. Like my husband and I tried to save to make sure we had some flexibility. I was really honest with clients and said like, hey, I'm going to be out at a certain point. When I was comfortable sharing, I just told them like, are you out? I have some people coming in. I'd like to make the introductions, but work will continue as always. So it's a lot of training other people and their expectations as well to make sure that the money kind of stays steady while you're out taking care of yourself.
I think there's often sometimes a transition plan too. So maybe it doesn't look as black and white as you're not working, you start a business, or you're at a job and now you're full on with your business. Right. Sometimes there's a transition plan. And so for some of the women that I've worked with who are working full time, they've maybe had a goal of being an entrepreneur for a really long time and they just don't have any mental and emotional capacity left at the end of the day to give to building a business, to get it to a successful place before they feel comfortable leaving their 9 to 5. And so sometimes the solution, while sometimes it feels a little like, ooh, I don't really want to do that, might be to just go find a simpler job that doesn't take as much emotional and mental energy, so that you're still bringing in income, but you are able to give more of yourself to building a business so that you can eventually leave. Because if you can never get to that place where you're giving enough to that business to grow it and hit your financial goals, then it's just never going to happen. So
yeah, I'll add to that as well. I think, something that doesn't get talked about a lot in the business world is being okay with taking a loan, a small loan. So if it's a good fit for you and your family and your finances, I took one myself just as a little comfort of like, okay, I've done all the planning I can do. I feel pretty confident, but I would feel a lot better and my anxiety is going to go down a lot if I know I've got a little buffer. And then when I didn't use it, I paid it back. And there were, I made sure I took one out that had no penalties for early repayment. And so just having that line of credit to myself really was really the difference between being able to go into the birth of my second child much more calm than I did the first time around. I wasn't willing to do that the first time. I just didn't really think about it. But then when my second daughter was born, I was like, I have all of these resources that I've worked so hard to build this network of people that I trust and that I've been banking with for so long. Why don't I just talk to them about it? And so, I think there's a lot of resources out there that we just don't always consider. And for some reason, borrowing money feels dirty, but it's not, right? It's like, it's a great tool. We use it all the time. So why not do that for ourselves?
I just did it. My husband wants to do something, and pursue, he's feeling like moms right now, and he's feeling like he wants to pursue something. And, we took out a little loan and it did feel dirty. It really did. And I was like, oh gosh. And the fear is like, oh my gosh, what if we can't pay this back? That was the fear. And when, I think back, I did something similar, but it wasn't as fearful because I was, when Brian and I started Insomnicat, we had left our, comfortable positions, with our guaranteed paychecks. And for me, I felt that I was never going to give 100% of myself to anything unless I had nothing to fall back on. And so, I love to use that story of, the Spanish conquistador guy who, sailed here and burnt all the ships, Cortez. Yes. And burns all the ships so that now you fight or you die. So you either win or die. And I was like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing here. And that was the only way that I knew it would work for me. But I did go and take my money out from like my 401k. And so I had a little bit of a cushion. I was like, okay, I'm good for 3 months and let's see what we can do here, but it was really scary. It was really scary. So, and my son was about a year and a half. No, I lie. He was older than that. I did this twice in my life. I will just tell you that. So the second time he was older. Yeah. The first time I was terrified. He was only like a year and a half. He was, 4 and 3 or 4. And so I was like, oh crap, Yeah.
But then again, you're doing something to actually protect yourself and your family, right? Like you don't want to wait until there's a crisis situation to have to pull your money out of something. And I think for me, it was just being able to ensure I could pay the people that I had brought in, I had done the planning, to Stacy's point. I had done the planning and I knew kind of where my money stood. But there's always the what ifs. I think this is something that's true for women and moms, right? We always go through all the scenarios like, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And so I said, okay, I really don't want to spend the maternity leave that I planned worried about this. So I'm just going to solve this problem by having this additional cash, like ready to go should I need it. And it worked out great. So again, I'm not saying it's the right fit for everybody because it can feel all sorts of ways, as money always does. But if it's a good thing for your family, I always want to put it back out there for consideration.
Yeah. And it's about, your passion. And that's really what it comes down to. I know like there's all these other technical things that you got to consider, like money, right? But, there's this, when it comes down to it, it's really about the passion. And I think a lot of moms don't really, they put their passions on the back burner. They really do. I do. I, for example, have been writing a book for, I don't know, 4 years, and that's something, if I had no child, I could have been done with very quickly. Right. But it's hard. It's like, where do you find that time? So imagine now a whole business, right? How do you find that time? I've got to, work and do the kids stuff and do the other stuff and all the stuff. And, what do you say to someone who wants to put it on hold for a little while until, let's say, the kids get older, because I find myself like, oh, maybe I'll just wait until he's, leaves the house more, or, something like that. There's always I'll wait until, what do you say to that? And anybody who wants to take this one, go for it.
I can start. I just think it's so important to, this is kind of that cliche that we all know, but it's a cliche and it's well told because it's true. It's like, fill your cup first so you have more to give. And I've worked with a lot of moms who use their entrepreneurial journey to inspire their kids and to teach them to go after and claim what they want and to follow their passions. And I think that's such a bold journey to go on. And I love that. And I think just reminding them that doing things for yourself does not mean that you're neglecting your kids or your family. In fact, you're modeling for them what you're probably trying to teach them. So instead of just telling them, take care of yourself and go after your dreams, you're actually showing them and you're doing it themselves. And I think there's still a way to prioritize properly. And I'm a big fan of having radically mindful and intentional priorities in your business, especially when you have a family. And so it's really important to be intentional about that and plan for that, so that, yes, you go after these dreams, but you're still putting the things that matter to you most first.
Yeah, I'll add to that. The subtitle to my book is How to Grow a Business and a Baby. So I'm certainly an advocate for doing both at once. It makes me a little bit sad. I understand why, and I've done it myself, but it makes me sad to see us pushing our passions aside for other things that come up in life because, to Stacey's point, what are we left with at the end of the day? We take care of other people, we take care of ourselves, but it's that passion that kind of keeps us going and keeps us excited about life and excited about the next thing up. And so when you get down to it, I think the logistics of it, we were talking about logistics versus passion almost. Mm-hmm. The logistics, I think, are what keep us from following the passion on a regular basis. And so if there's a way where you can find a Stacey or find somebody to sit down and really what does it look like to do this? What does it look like to take this passion and actually turn it into something? If you can get it down to little bite-sized pieces, it starts to be way less overwhelming. And I think any good idea can be just fueled by a little bit of energy every day. That doesn't mean it's going to be the full-blown business that you might imagine or this huge passion project that you want to get done. But if you can keep it alive every single day, I think that's amazing. And you're right. The model that we show our kids, I've got 2 daughters, and in our house, mommy's the one who works and mommy makes, a lot of the money. And my husband also contributes, but he's home a lot with the girls. And our family dynamics are a little bit different, but it actually feels really good to have that. And it didn't always, it was hard at first. But I think, putting the time and energy in, because I felt better. I felt the best really when I had my business and people to talk with and a network to rely on. That's really the only reason I think that my business has been as successful as it has been, is that I've got the supports, and then I'm just fueling it as much as I can through those logistical challenges every day.
But I'm sure there are plenty of moms who have, they're kind of past that point where they're raising the kids and they can do both. There's probably a lot of moms who are now kind of coming back and going, okay, now what about me? Now that my kids are older, what about me? I want to do something now. I'm sure you've seen this a lot, Stacey. How are those challenges kind of different than someone who's, in the midst of raising that family and trying to pursue their passion?
Yeah, I love just the reignited fire that they bring to their business, but there's also this trepidation and like, oh gosh, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to really allowing myself this time and going after the things that I love. And I think just we all experience imposter syndrome. I know we talked about that before, Nicolette, but like just this idea of like, who am I to do this? And I think moms definitely experience that, especially if they have been out of the workforce for a while. Getting back into it might feel like a scary thing, or like, do I have a right to do this? And of course they have a right to do this. And so just kind of that reassurance and that guidance, and also just getting them to sort of shift their focus back to them and what they want, and saying no and setting those boundaries. Even if you are already an empty nester, or your kids are in school most of the time, I think that's still something that they struggle with, because maybe for so long they've put their focus elsewhere and have served other people. And so doing what they think is right and going after their hell yeses and saying no to the things that aren't hell yeses can sometimes be a difficult thing, and just encouraging them to lean into that gut.
Yeah. I can't imagine, I know that everybody, has their own, look, everybody's different, right? Some things get moms really excited, other things don't. For me, I think about, what would I do if I didn't have something for myself? What would I do when my son got older? I feel empty just thinking about that. If I had nothing to kind of turn to that was my own, and then he left, I feel that way sometimes when he just goes out with, now that he's getting older, he goes out with his friends, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, what do I do with myself? I've got a ton of things to do, but there's that feeling of that emptiness. And I just can't imagine what that must feel like for a mom who doesn't have something of her own as well. How difficult that must be. It's creepy to think about.
I heard recently, which I thought was really interesting, that you should envision like your 8-year-old self and what that is, if we were talking to a woman, what that girl liked and was interested in and found fun doing, and try to like tap into some of those things. This was a conversation around joy, like how do we have joy in our lives? And I loved the idea of like thinking of myself as this, like, I don't know, as this little child who was just like crafting for fun, right? Like not crafting to get it done, which would be what my approach now, like, let's get it finished and like make it look good and like make it useful. Like, how can I use this? Yeah. But I was like making window clings, like things that were just like a fun use of my hands, and like kind of a fun way to spend some time, as a way to like just get excited about something again. And I was like, that's really fun. I like that prompt to get us thinking again.
Yeah. And I think just, it's so important for all of us to just take that time to experiment, and like not trying to overplan it or overanalyze it, like just do different things and see what sparks your fire, because you might need to do some rediscovery and things may have changed too. And so I think just allowing yourself that freedom, that experimentation that we often don't give ourselves as adult women, I think can be a really important tool for anyone.
I'm too busy trying to figure out how I can sell whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm like, okay, now this can be a business, right? Instead of having fun. like, no, not everything is a business, Nicolette. Just stop.
Yeah. It's tempting though. It's tempting.
Well, I think that's why we're good entrepreneurs, right? Because we see the opportunity in everything. So you have to be choiceful about which opportunities you have to go after, actually go after, and which you like reserve just as, a fun, non-revenue driving activity.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's kind of, and you guys kind of answered my other question about, what about moms who know they want to do something and they just don't know what they want to do? Like, I have this vision. I want my life to be a little bit more flexible. I want to be there for the kids as they're growing, but I also I've never actually had some passions. I mean, I feel that way sometimes. Like, what is it that I like? I don't know. What I guess telling them to go back and think about their 8-year-old self would be the answer at that point, right? And to experiment. I guess that's valid whether you've been out of the workforce or if you just want to start something.
Yeah, and to just start paying attention, just maybe be more introspective than you've been recently. Just start seeing, like, what do I enjoy? Why do I enjoy this piece of it? Like, what is it about that? Or what do I not enjoy? What gives me energy? What doesn't? So just start paying attention to those things in your day-to-day life, or doing some of those experiments. But I think, the other thing too, are just like thinking, what do I care about? Like, what do I get fired up about when someone's talking about something or I see something. And I think those are great indicators of maybe where a business opportunity could be. And most of the time, so I'm a huge proponent of building a business around an ideal client. Like you're trying to serve this client, you're getting to know what their unique challenges are, and you become an expert solving those. And most of the time, people build businesses around an ideal client that represents who they are or who they've been in their life. And so just thinking about like, who am I? Who have I been? What are the experiences I've had? And where on that journey do I get fired up about maybe helping other people through that part of their life as well? And I think that's a great place to maybe explore where to start a business too.
Yeah, I would add also you can talk to people about it, right? So after you've done your own kind of introspection, I think talking to other people about your business, about the ideas, about things that you're considering, that's always been really productive for me. So I think you learn a few things. You learn the people who are going to take you seriously and the people who aren't. And I think that's really important to know in your network. And then I think you also get feedback about things that you might not even know about yourself, things that people observe about you that you find commonplace, that they find extraordinary. And that can be really insightful when we can't always see ourselves the way other people see us. And I wish we could, but we can't. And so talking about it is the best way to open up that feedback loop of, what are my strengths? What am I good at? Why do they come to me? What's magnetic about me, and what problems can I solve? And I think also just, we were talking, Nicolette, before the podcast started about that mom who helped you, and in the post office, right? When you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, I'm so tired. I'm so grumpy. I don't really want to be here right now. And like a little bit of compassion goes a long way. So I think other moms are ready to support, and other women are ready to support other women. Other moms are ready to support other moms. And so just kind of opening up your world to them and being open to the feedback and the conversations. And then you can dive right back into what Stacey was saying about like seeing what gets you fired up, I love talking about moms and businesses, and I can do it all day. And so this is where I'm going to land because I love it. And I think, that it starts to become more and more apparent when you just bring it up and chat about it.
Absolutely. And there's so many people think that they don't have a right to be an expert in something if they haven't previously been paid for it, which is not true. Like so many of us gain our most important experience through our life experiences, not necessarily our professional experiences. So it's okay to go and want to do something that you haven't been paid for before, and just think about like, well, no, I am an expert in this. I may not have been paid for it yet, but like I've done this, this, and this in my life, and this is how that strength has showed up. And I'm just ready to like give that to the world in a new way now. And so just being confident in that. And when you merge that with what you really care about, I think that's really where you're going to find something that you're going to be successful and happy in.
Yeah.
I think actually, as we're having this discussion, I can think back to some of the parents that I went to, the kids I went to school with, even looking at there were a handful of parents in that school who turned their love for their children and volunteering into like positions at the school, right? I mean, it could be something as simple as that. I want to make some money. I want to contribute. I want to have something, and they were always volunteering. And then suddenly they, were like the nursery teacher. They decided to start, things like that, and pursued higher education then to become, there are so many. I guess it can look and feel so many different ways. And I often see it as one way, like, oh, starting your own business. But, mom can pursue passions that, she can work for other people too. That is an option. It's not always about, just starting, not always about being an entrepreneur. In my mind, it is, but it's not always about that, right? It's about, following your passion, doing something that builds self-esteem and gives you something for you, whatever that might be, and some people don't want to have their own business too. Like, let's just keep that,
I know lots of people who are like, this is just not for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's as valuable to know as the trying of it. You just have to say like, I prefer having a more steady, reliable income and being able to clock in and clock out, because those things kind of disappear a little bit when you start your own business.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's so important to just understand that about yourself, like what motivates you, what fills you up, what are your priorities. because it might not be as well suited for entrepreneurship, and that's okay. And I've got plenty of, female friends who are moms and like had stayed home for a bit of time. And then they're like, you know what, like I need to use my brain in a different way. I need to ignite other passions, and I just need to go back to work. And even though like the break even for me paying for childcare, right, I'm not really coming out ahead. It's not that they don't even want to work for the money. It's like I'm working for myself at this point because I just want something different in my life right now, or to mix it up a little bit. And I think that's, that's important to be able to admit that and go after that if you want it.
And that could be the transition too. I mean, think about it. You have a child, you get something solid, even though, like you said, childcare and your income are breaking even, you're kind of laying the foundation for when your children are older. So now you're back in the workforce. You're doing something that, maybe you're thinking about new ideas as you're there, meeting new people. So that could be the transition too, that you mentioned earlier, transitioning to a different job. But in this sense, transitioning back and toward your passion even.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting your feet in somewhere and playing around with it. Mm-hmm.
I like that. Huh. See what happens when women come together. So, you mentioned earlier, Claire, about talking about finance, insurance, let's say, things you don't think about, right? And in Expectant Entrepreneur, you talk about kind of the different decisions you had to make at the different stages of your pregnancy. And I wanted to talk for a moment about that and the kinds of decisions you're talking about.
Yeah, so they're like as big and as important as insurance. And then they're also all the way back down to like, am I going to pretend to drink at this like networking function, or am I just going to tell people that I'm pregnant? Like I was thinking through all sorts of kinds of decisions. And that drinking example was really about like comfort and communication. What am I willing to tell people? When am I willing to tell them? But in my experience, I decided at one point during my second pregnancy, so my first child, I pretty much was winging it the whole time, just trying to figure it out. With my second one, I had a little more experience as a business owner, and I had a lot more women in my network who were asking me questions about like how I was going to plan my business and my baby. So I decided to just like take voice recordings. I wasn't really sure what it was going to turn into. As we know now, like spoiler alert, it turned into the book that I wrote. But during the time, I was just taking voice recordings of like, here's what I'm thinking about today. Because in the moment, every decision feels really big. So for instance, I was trying to figure out what to tell a client who was a pretty steady, high dollar retainer client. I was trying to decide when and what to tell them, because when you're pregnant and you're the female business owner, it is nerve-wracking, to say the least, to tell somebody that you're going to be out for a couple of months at minimum, and they're paying you lots of money every month to make sure things are going. And I was their primary contact the whole time. And so I had just had to decide, what am I going to share and when am I going to share it? And my business partner at the time said something to me that I'll never forget. And she said, well, what would a man feel obliged to share, right? So like, would he walk into the room and feel like, I need to tell you guys that my wife is expecting? Like, it just wouldn't play out the same way, right? So I thought a lot about that, and I shared a lot of those experiences. But when I was talking so the book that I put together, I was able to capture the stories of lots of women from all over the world. And the themes that came out of it were really about communication. It was about building a team. So who's going to be doing what? What are you going to stop doing? What are you going to keep doing? And what are you just going to keep doing yourself, or you're going to hand off to another person? How do you want your money to flow? How do you want your business to work? Like all of these things about your daily life that you kind of forget about when you're in it. But then when you think about stepping out of it, there's a lot of decisions that we make in a day. And so some of the things that I was deciding about were money. Some of them were about relationships. Some of them were about like what I wanted to do for myself as a mom. And again, with like winging it the first time with my first daughter, I was like, I'll be fine after 5 weeks, right? Like I'll be totally ready to go back to work. And so like I had things kind of set around this 5-week plan, and it was really tough. It was really tough. I wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. And so I had to do some like really quick figuring it out the first time. So I gave myself much more time with my second daughter and just making decisions along the way about like, where does Claire the mom fit in here? Where does Claire the individual fit in here? Where does Claire the business owner fit in here? And like trying to anticipate the needs of each one of those things, in addition to, that's a change for your whole household. So I already had a daughter when the new baby came, and my husband obviously was going to be a dad for the second time. And so there's just all these little decisions, micro decisions that once you start to get them out of your head, they can swirl fast in your head, but when you start to get them out of your head, they're very manageable. And with a good support system, it came down to just making the best call that I could at the time.
Yeah, I was excited to go back to work after 5 weeks. I don't know. I think it took 8 weeks, and I was like done at 4 weeks. I was like, get me out of here, please. No, but so everybody's different, right?
You can flex on the other side too and be like, you know what? I'm ready. Like my lines are open. Give me a call. I'm ready to talk to somebody, depending on how your baby is, right? And some babies and some pregnancies are really difficult, and like babies are unpredictable. You just don't know if there's going to be health issues or sleep issues or whatever. Yeah. So we just have to, give ourselves room for that space as much as we can.
Yeah. You gave me a flashback actually. And I wasn't even, doing this yet. I was just an employee when I got pregnant with my son, and Brian was my boss at the time. And this was, I guess, how many years ago? 8 years ago. And I remember being terrified. So talk about telling your client, I was like terrified to tell my boss that I was pregnant. No, I had no idea why I was terrified. Nobody had ever given me any indication that I should be terrified or that this was a scary thing. But I felt like, I would be viewed as not, as reliable of an employee or whatever it might be. And, and I remember that conversation. I was so scared. I was sweating, and I was like as though I just kind of screwed our biggest client kind of thing. And I was just like, I have to tell you something. So I'm pregnant. And I just remember he was so excited. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a good thing. Okay, cool. And I was just terrified about being a mom in general. So it just kind of rolled over, I was not expecting to be a mother at that point. So I, my little surprise. And so I was just terrified. And it really helps to have people to support you across the board then, just having that different feedback, like this excitement, it allowed me the room to then get excited and figure out, okay, we'll plan accordingly, and when things rolled, like you talk about difficult pregnancies, I was on bed rest for 3 months. I was at work and the doctor called and was like, you need to go home right now. And I'm like, what, for the day? How long do I need to go home? I need to tell people. He's like, no, forever until you have this baby. And I'm like, wait, what? And I just remember having that support. And I worked for a company at the time they were amazing. They allowed me to work from home when working from home wasn't a big thing. And so it was just a really, having that support made all the difference. It really did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this past year is going to open up a lot of avenues for a lot of moms, having the flexibility to find people who are going to be excited when you tell them that you're pregnant and that your family is growing, and the ability to work from home is shifted. We're no longer so siloed. In my opinion, it doesn't feel so much like I need to only be one part of who I am, because we always show up as our whole selves all the time. I'm always a mom. I'm always a daughter. I'm always a wife all the time. Right. And so I think that the tolerance for people who don't allow us to do that is going to go down significantly. So if you're in a workforce situation where that's really, it's really not supported, I don't think that women are going to have the tolerance, nor should they, to stick around. And so I think the options are going to open a lot more moving forward. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I agree. Now, you mentioned earlier, Claire, mom guilt, right? And I asked someone this very question, and you kind of just said it out there and made me feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone, right? I'm either having work guilt or mom guilt. So it's either, I'm either giving all of myself to work, and those days, everything's good, things are going, but my son is miserable. He's breaking up the house. He's just a miserable human, and I'm not enough, and I'm not giving enough, and I'm not doing enough. And I'm like, okay. And, or I'm having a great time with him and he's getting all of my love and focus. And then like, things are slacking at work. I'm like sleeping later. Things aren't getting done as efficiently. What is that about?
Well, I think it's just like life, right? I wish so much that I had a perfect answer for this, but I really don't. And the only thing that I can think of is that I think we just really have to start looking at it as like seasons of life, right? So literally this year, I had a summer that I was very hands-on with my kids. I just was ready to do it. My oldest daughter was getting ready to start kindergarten. So I knew we had a shift in our family coming up with her going to school. And so I had this literal season of summer where I was really kind of stepped back from my work. I still was getting things done, but I was really working like 2.5 days a week. And it was really scary at first because it felt like I was neglecting my clients in so many ways. But it turned out everybody was fine. Like I got the work done. Everything was fine. It was just me and my own expectations of things being a certain way that I wasn't meeting. And so I think my first, piece of advice is that when you're feeling guilt, like, where is it actually coming from? Are you actually not serving your people, right, whether that's your clients or your children or your family, or is it just the expectation that you have in your head? And can we adjust that a little bit? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is just to be okay, I think, with the fact that like sometimes maybe it's a day, maybe it's several months, or, we were talking earlier about a woman going back into the corporate world, like maybe her season as a mom is now like she can graduate from that in a certain way, and she can go back to work and pursue her passion a little bit differently. So I think just like knowing that it's not going to be this balance of every single day where 50% this and 50% that, or 30% this or whatever. So giving ourselves a little bit more grace, and also just like checking a little bit where the expectations are coming from, because I had a blast this summer and my clients were fine. I've shifted now into like diving back into work full throttle, and they're really dazzled because I am stepping it up from where I was over the summer, and my kids are fine. My family's good. Like everybody's where they need to be. So it just goes in waves, I think, and probably we're our own worst enemies in this area of just like constantly thinking we should be doing this and should be doing that, when really we're doing a great job every single day. So
yeah, and I even have the entrepreneur guilt, so I can't even imagine like compounding that with being a mom. I think this is kind of like a universal theme. I've been talking with entrepreneurs about this forever. Like no matter what we're doing, we feel like we should be doing something else on the other side. Yes. And I think what Claire said rings so true for everyone, just being like intentional and just making those choices. And also just like for me, I had to realize that I was projecting a lot of those emotions onto my husband. Mm-hmm. He didn't think what I thought he thought, but because I wasn't talking to him about it and asking him what he really thought, I was having this own just agony in my head that I wasn't being a good enough wife and daughter, and then I wasn't being a good enough entrepreneur. And it was like just having those honest and raw, vulnerable conversations, and just saying like, or when I'm managing a household renovation, like I'm the key point for that. And we've had conversations even around that, like, okay, but what this means is I can't give as much to my business. So it might not be growing as much. Are we okay with that? Are we financially secure with that? And so the more we've had that communication and just gotten honest about like where are those feelings coming from, I think the easier it is to deal with that and then to plan for it and make those choices and feel good about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. All right, ladies, I'm going to ask you $1 million questions. Okay. This is it. I always love when people like kind of wrap up their favorite advice, right? So I'd love to keep this on the topic of, all right, I'll divide it up. So Stacey, like your best advice for mom entrepreneurs, right? When it comes to prioritizing and time management and balancing and things like that. And pretty much the same question, Claire, from that mom perspective of balance and prioritizing.
Yeah. So I alluded to it a little bit before, but I think just being radically mindful and intentional about your priorities and saying no and having no guilt over that. And I'm a huge proponent of building your business around your ideal lifestyle, not working your lifestyle around your business. And so even myself, like I always plan my personal priorities first. I protect them. But then on the other side, which I think is something that I've seen a lot of moms struggle with, is but then plan your business time and also protect your business time if that's important to you as well. So it goes both ways in terms of being intentional and protecting that time and giving each the time you want it to have. And to Claire's point earlier, it's okay for that to ebb and flow, but the more intentional you are about it, the more you sit and reflect and plan for that, the better you're going to feel about it in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is applicable to pretty much anyone, anywhere, including our kids, but I just consider this plant therapy. So when I'm like really in a bad mood, everything's horrible, I don't like anything, it's time for a little plant therapy. So that means I need to drink some water, I need to go outside, I need to find something solid to like kind of like either rest in or just like get some, and I need to get some nutrients. So that's my 4-point recommendation for anybody on like a really terrible day, because they come up, right? Anytime. But I think in terms of actual like business and life advice for moms out there is that you really just need to give it a go. And it's okay to be bold. It's okay to be unapologetic about what you want. And there are women out there who are ready to like get on board with you. So find your people and like love them hard. So those are my 2. Get your plant therapy and then find your people.
I love plant therapy. I thought you were going to be talking about like the household plant obsession back here, but like even better, the acronym. I'm going to use that. I'll give you credit. Don't worry.
There were many ways that could have went.
It feels natural to me. I'm like, all right, I hate everybody. I'm going outside. I'm drinking some water. I'm going to have some nutrients, and maybe I'm going to rest for a minute, and we'll regroup in 20 minutes.
Oh, goodness. Well, ladies, can you just, let everyone know where they can learn more about everything you guys are working on? I don't know how to manage 2 of you, so go ahead. Someone go. I only got one child.
So sorry, Stacey, go for it.
So the best place to learn more about me, connect with me, join my free events, or get resources is at my website, stacykessler.me.
And you can find me on Instagram. It's at Krawsczyn, and we'll link it here with the podcast. And then also expectantentrepreneur.com has access to the book, Expect an Entrepreneur. Also plenty of ways to get in contact with me there.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
This was so fun.